Joseph Quinn's story does not begin with applause, red carpets, or viral fame. It begins in silence, in the kind of quiet years most people never talk about. The years where effort feels invisible and belief is constantly questioned, because long before the world knew his face, long before millions recognized his voice, Joseph was simply an actor chasing something he could barely explain but deeply felt, a pull toward storytelling, toward becoming someone else on stage, because real life did not always offer clarity. And what makes his journey powerful is not the speed of his success, but the patience it demanded. Because Joseph Quinn spent years training, auditioning, being rejected, and waiting, not days or months, but long stretches of time where nothing seemed to move forward, where roles were small, recognition was absent, and progress felt painfully slow. And this is where most people quietly quit, not because they lack talent, but because they lose faith during the waiting. But Joseph stayed, not loudly, not dramatically, but stubbornly, showing up again and again, committing to the craft even when the world offered no guarantee it would ever pay off, because acting for him was not about being seen, it was about becoming better, learning how to listen, how to feel, how to disappear into characters even when no one was watching, and that discipline shaped him, because rejection either hardens you or sharpens you, and Joseph allowed it to sharpen him, each no becoming a lesson rather than a verdict, each silence becoming space to grow rather than a sign to stop. And during these years, he lived the reality most aspiring actors live but rarely admit: the uncertainty, the financial pressure, the quiet fear of time passing, the comparison with peers who seemed to move faster. And yet he resisted the urge to rush, understanding intuitively that rushing growth often leads to collapse later, and so he focused on foundation, on training, on understanding character psychology, on respecting the craft rather than chasing attention, because he knew that fame without skill is fragile, but skill built patiently can carry you through storms. And this belief sustained him when progress felt invisible, because Joseph Quinn's rise was not fueled by instant validation, it was fueled by internal commitment, the kind that survives doubt, loneliness, and long gaps between opportunity. And when small roles came, he treated them with the same seriousness as lead roles, because professionalism is not conditional on recognition. And that mindset separated him quietly from many others, because the industry notices consistency before it rewards it, even if it takes time. And time it took, because Joseph did not break through in his early years. He did not become famous overnight, and that delay, while painful, became his greatest strength, because it allowed him to mature emotionally, artistically, and mentally before the spotlight arrived. And when you understand that, you understand why his eventual success felt so grounded, so natural, so earned, because he was not discovering himself under pressure. He had already done that work in private, and when the opportunity finally came, when the role that would change everything entered his life, he was ready, not just technically but psychologically, because readiness is not luck. It is preparation meeting patience, and Joseph Quinn embodied that truth fully, because by the time the world noticed him, he was not chasing fame. Fame was catching up to years of quiet discipline, and this is why his story resonates so deeply with people struggling in silence, because it proves that delayed success is not denied success, that being unseen does not mean being unworthy, and that persistence, when guided by purpose rather than desperation, eventually creates moments that feel inevitable in hindsight, even if they felt impossible in the beginning. And Joseph's journey reminds us that some lives are not meant to explode early. They are meant to build slowly, so that when the moment finally comes, the foundation is strong enough to hold the weight of attention, expectation, and global recognition. And this was only the beginning. Because what happened after the world finally noticed him would test not just his talent, but his humility, resilience, and ability to remain himself when fame arrived faster than anyone could have predicted. What happened after Joseph Quinn stepped into the role that would change his life forever was something no amount of training could fully prepare him for. Because fame does not arrive gently, it crashes into your life without warning. And when Stranger Things introduced Eddie Munson to the world, Joseph was no longer just an actor quietly working his way through auditions. He became a global face. Overnight, recognized on the streets, discussed online, analyzed, admired, and projected onto by millions of people who felt like they suddenly knew him. And this sudden visibility was both a gift and a shock, because while audiences fell in love with Eddie's vulnerability, rebellion, humor, and heart, Joseph was still processing how quickly everything had changed, how years of anonymity had been replaced by constant attention, how private effort had turned into public consumption, and this transition is where many people lose themselves. Because when the world starts telling you who you are, it becomes dangerously easy to listen, but Joseph didn't arrive unprepared. Because the years of waiting had taught him emotional discipline, patience, and humility, lessons that became anchors when the noise grew loud, and even as his popularity exploded, he remained visibly grounded, almost surprised by the attention. Not because he lacked confidence, but because he understood how fragile fame is, how temporary trends can be, and how dangerous it is to confuse a character's success with your own identity, and this awareness protected him, because Eddie Munson was fearless, chaotic, and unapologetic. But Joseph Quinn was thoughtful, reserved, introspective, someone who understood that characters are moments, not definitions, and that understanding allowed him to appreciate success without being consumed by it. And yet the pressure was immense, because suddenly expectations formed instantly, interviews multiplied, social media attention intensified, and the industry began watching closely to see what he would do next. And this is the moment that defines careers, the moment after the breakout, where choices matter more than talent because talent opens doors. But decision-making determines longevity. And Joseph faced that moment not with desperation but with caution, choosing projects carefully, protecting his craft, resisting the urge to capitalize recklessly on fame, because he knew that chasing momentum without intention often leads to burnout, typecasting, or collapse. And this restraint stood out because restraint is rare in a world addicted to visibility. And his ability to stay quiet when everyone expected noise made him even more compelling, because it signaled confidence, not fear, and audiences sensed that because true confidence does not rush to prove itself, it allows time to speak, and Joseph allowed time to shape him further, even under the spotlight, continuing to study, refine, and respect the process that brought him there. And while fans celebrated Eddie Munson as a symbol of misunderstood youth, creativity, and resistance, Joseph carried the responsibility of representing something bigger than a role, because suddenly he became a reflection for people who felt unseen, different, or dismissed, and he carried that responsibility gently, without exploiting it, without turning it into a brand, because he understood that influence is most powerful when it is not forced, and that authenticity is not something you perform, it's something you protect. And as the hype peaked, as conversations shifted from admiration to speculation, as the industry attempted to define him quickly, Joseph continued to resist shortcuts, understanding that a career built slowly can survive attention, but a career rushed by hype often collapses under expectation, and this mindset allowed him to move forward without panic, without arrogance, without losing the quiet discipline that shaped him long before the world was watching. And this phase of his journey reveals something essential, that success does not erase insecurity, it magnifies it if you haven't addressed it. And because Joseph had already faced rejection, doubt, and invisibility, fame did not break him, it tested him, and he passed not by being loud, but by being consistent, thoughtful, and grounded, showing that real strength and success is not about dominating attention, but about remaining yourself while standing in the center of it. And as the world waited to see whether he was a moment or a movement, Joseph Quinn stood calmly in the uncertainty, trusting the same patience that carried him through years of silence, knowing that the next chapter would require not just talent, but wisdom, because staying relevant is easy compared to staying real. And what came next would determine not how famous he became, but how long his story would matter.